You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And welcome also to our season finale. After this episode, we're into the summer hiatus, but we will be back, hopefully rested, sassy, and filled with energy for the fall election season, returning just after Labor Day. Of course, should anything excessively unusual, that is, beyond even the everyday unusual new abnormal we all live in now, in case that should happen, we will leap on that with a special episode which, if you subscribe to the broadcast, which you can do for free, will pop up in your email box automatically. But a return of the podcast will also be announced on social media. I do have 2 podcast suggestions while we're gone if you get withdrawal symptoms. The archives of all our previous episodes are there for the browsing and listening at the Women's Media Center, specifically at WMClive.com. This is a great time to catch up on any you might have missed. Also, I'd recommend an upcoming podcast in July from Wonder Media Network called She Votes! Where award-winning journalists and friends Lynn Scher and Ellen Goodman unravel the complex history of the women's suffrage movement from the unintended limits of the 19th century to the return of voter suppression. 2020 is, after all, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and this is a good way of observing and celebrating that. More info at shevotespodcast.com. I also want to take a personal moment right now to express my thanks for all the awards our podcast has received, but especially to express the depth of my gratitude to the dedicated staff who make this show possible. From locating and booking guests, to ensuring that they're ready for the conversation, and doing all the follow-up with them on social media, to the engineering of the show through production, post-production, distribution, promotion, social media, and so much else. These good people roll with the punches of a weekly hour podcast, which, especially during the past months, has bobbed along like a small, stubborn canoe on a wild, rough ocean of news. We're not a news show, we know that, and we don't intend to be, but we do like to be as timely as possible, which sometimes means scrapping plans for parts of or for an entire episode because of some major breaking story, which is continually breaking these days, or the rewriting or re-recording or rebooking of a guest or re-editing and everything else, all at the last minute necessitated by that. The goodwill, the sense of humor, and the respect for each other and for this mission is what gets us through. I'm also grateful for the loving collaboration of Julie Burton, president of the Women's Media Center and executive producer of this program, and to Regina Scully, founding sponsor and sustaining sponsor as well as co-executive producer, for her unwavering support of our vision for this program. Last, at the risk of sounding sappy, and though getting prizes is all very nice, my gratitude is unbounded to you, the listeners, for your intelligent ears, for your tolerance of my rants and raves, your interest in our guests, each one a remarkable person, and for your emails. The audience for Women's Media Center Live continues to grow exponentially and is now in 111 countries, including North Korea, China, and Saudi Arabia, where it has been banned. I'm so proud to be a part of it. And in September, we will be starting our 9th year. All that said, we have a departure from the usual show for you today, and one I think that you'll like. But first, we need to go inside the headlines and look back at the season's headlines all of which also constitutes the same as being in the surrealism corner. And come to think of it, when have the headlines not been, at least of late, the same as the surrealism corner? Either way, inside the surreal headlines is coming right up. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMClive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Oh yeah, if we're looking back inside the headlines at the surrealism corner, we're doing so from today's surrealism corner too. It seems incredible, but it's actually true. The accordion pleating of time, when so much happens so fast that decades seem to be going by, but no, it's only a few dizzying months. Last September, when we began this season of Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan, the student climate change school strikes were just beginning. Trump was reliably inveighing against the invasion by immigrants. Remember the caravans that didn't exist? While the majority of the public had shifted to being in favor of holding impeachment hearings. Greta Thunberg had begun to tour the United States, and the American Psychological Association released a study showing that Americans now finally believed women were just as competent as men. Try the word more. Language, in fact, was a consistent theme on this program throughout the season, from deploring the cowardly fudge words like disturbing and troubling to describe Trump's acts, words barfed out by the GOP senators, when their hair and their pants should have been on fire about what was going on. Words like the crucial importance of an adverb in the phrase Trump used to the Ukrainian president. We would like you to do us a favor, though. The U.S. House of Representatives formally entered into full-blown impeachment hearings, and we were so relieved at last. We became familiar with my own very fine representative, Jerry Nadler, chair of the Judiciary Committee, who I have nicknamed Tevye, as in Tevye Goes to Congress, for his Old Testament wrath and for his sad-eyed, Jewish, pogrom-ridden face. We became acquainted with the elegant, brilliant Adam Schiff from California, and with Congresswoman Val Demings of Florida, currently being considered a vice presidential candidate to run with Joe Biden. Meanwhile, back over in the Senate, Kavanaugh had been confirmed for the Supreme Court. Doesn't that feel like it happened in, I don't know, 1954? Hong Kong people were fighting for democracy in the streets, and still are. Mark Zuckerberg was digging down deep, and still is, to shamefully exempt politics from fact-checking. India blockaded Kashmir into famine, disease, and death, and Nancy Pelosi trended in lively photographs showing her pointing a finger at Trump and sternly dressing him down. By November, California was burning with wildfires. But Joy Harjo had been named the first Native American Poet Laureate of the United States, and she came on this program to celebrate that. 72 female members of the UK Parliament, across class and party lines, signed an open letter in support of Meghan Markle for her fight back against tabloid media that was treating her with racist colonial undertones. Lots of buzz hovered around Kamala Harris leaving the race for the Democratic presidential nomination, and questions about whether that meant she would be a candidate strongly for the VP as would Stacey Abrams, who was pushing hard for that nomination. An ordinary citizens group, American Oversight, creatively used the Freedom of Information Act to obtain papers that the Trump regime was denying to Congress. When I took stock of 2019 at the end of last year, I celebrated the fact that Congress was now handing down 2 articles of impeachment, and that despite appeals, Bill Cosby still remained in jail, still in a 7 by 13-foot cell, still known as prisoner number NN8687. By the end of January this year, is that possible? Harvey Weinstein was being forced to go to court. Pelosi outfoxed Mitch McConnell and got the articles of impeachment sent to the Senate in her own time. And we duly noted new research showing that box crabs had same-sex orgies and that same-sex sexual behavior was also found in a wide variety of animals. We also noted that a strange virus, a coronavirus afflicting Wuhan, China, might conceivably spread globally. Who could imagine such a thing? The impeachment trial swung into full gear, becoming, with the insistence of the Republican majority Senate, the first such trial in U.S. history to forbid factual evidence and witnesses. It was a glorious free press that got us that far. Clearly, this is an age of great journalism. By Christmas, astronaut Koch returned to Earth after 328 days in space, the longest space flight by a woman ever. Pelosi disdainfully ripped up Trump's mendacious State of the Union speech on camera, and Trump gave Rush Limbaugh the Medal of Freedom. Then the Weinstein verdict came down, and Harvey was sent to jail, while alerts began to escalate about this virus, and meanwhile also we learned that Trump was drastically cutting budgets at the Centers for Disease Control and the National Institute for Health. By March and Super Tuesday, the Democratic candidate slate had narrowed down from a Hollywood epic cast of thousands down to, oh dear, 2 white, older males. But by then we knew we would vote for gerbil against Trump. Female actors and directors led a walkout at the French Oscars in protest at Roman Polanski, convicted child rapist, being awarded Best Director. Mexico was roiled by a day without women, as feminists called it when they struck to protest endemic violence against women there. New York, meanwhile, became the global epicenter of the virus, and the world began to feel the economic effects. Racist attacks increased against Asian Americans due to Trump's repeated referring to it as the Chinese virus. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, surprised everyone, including me, by rising to the occasion and showing efficient and compassionate leadership during the crisis, even unto forcing gun retailers to close during the pandemic and ignoring the NRA's lawsuit against New York that claimed gun selling was essential to public health. During the shutdown, when everyone stayed home, domestic violence rates skyrocketed all over the world, as did femicide. Still, the air began to clear, and people 100 miles away from the Himalaya mountain chain in the Punjab could see the mountain tops for the first time in 50 years, while waterways began to cleanse themselves, and without the cacophony of traffic, the earth itself could be monitored seismologically for its deepest volcanic sounds. The planet could be heard, shifting and quivering. In April, it was almost generally acknowledged that women leaders had done a disproportionately terrific job in dealing with the pandemic among their populations, while male leaders, not so much. That includes Sweden's, where the male prime minister who opted for the herd immunity approach, which decimated its older population, later was forced to admit that was a mistake, but a mistake that cost lives. Then, of course, there was the ostrich-like denials, flat-out denials, of would-be dictators like Trump to the already are dictators like that of Turkmenistan, the guy who flatly forbid the utterance or printing of the word coronavirus. It just kept us surreeling. Trump prescribed guzzling Clorox and embedding UV light inside of people. The society had glimmerings of a realization, though, that the ER nurses, not to mention home aides, grocery clerks, sanitation workers, and the UPS guy, were all underpaid while being considered and applauded as essential. Artists planning their exhibitions, musicians with records coming out, authors with books and book tours planned, all crashed to the ground as the lockdown persisted. And 2020, which was supposed to have been the year celebrating the centennial of the 19th Amendment, canceled all large public gatherings. Although the death toll would rise to well over 100,000 by May, the horrific Minneapolis racist murder of George Floyd had us reeling from that as well. And the racist manner in which the Trumpists handled this atrocity was so infuriating that people took to the streets, masked and gloved, yes, but to the streets. By the beginning of June, day after week, people still were and still are marching, peacefully but relentlessly, not only over George Floyd, but over Kentucky's Breonna Taylor, killed by police in her bed, and then, like a nightmare right after, a new murder of Georgia's Rayshard Brooks. The outrage caught the imagination and the hearts of people around the world, who also took to the streets. And then, something I thought I'd never seen. Police chiefs stepped down. Cops were actually charged with crimes. Mayors quit. Legislation was drafted. The fresh scent of change wafted like a perfume, like a promise, through the air. But meanwhile, the South and Southwest United States now feels the brunt of the pandemic most severely. These are Trump regions, folks who believe his lies that the virus will just vanish and that they don't need to wear masks or to social distance. In fact, they crowded together in large groups, not marching, but indoors. So this summer heats up, and we go on marching, registering voters, pressuring lawmakers to become vigilant about the elections and to institute voting by mail. We go on toward November. And by the way, after a 9-month onslaught of freak floods, super strong hurricanes and tornadoes, and vast wildfires in California and Australia, record air pollution, and, oh yes, poisonous Asian murder hornets 6 inches long, now we have learned that the largest dust cloud ever sighted is right at this moment risen from the Sahara and on its way across the Atlantic to the United States. That's after the clouds of locusts, you understand. I'm tempted to say that people who don't believe in climate change might change their minds after the dust storm. But that's unless they're already dead in Mississippi or Alabama or Texas from having believed that the virus was a hoax. That would be all too real and sadly surreal. Time for another short break, and then we will be back directly with a few words about our surprise for this very special program. So don't go away. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.org.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Regular listeners to this podcast are familiar with my obsession about language. It's not surprising for a writer who believes that words matter and that Socrates was right when he said, "The misuse of language invites evil into the soul." You have only to look at 3 simple factual words, Black Lives Matter, as well as the indignant resistance to those words for many years, to understand how little black lives did matter to the American public until recently, and how much words do matter, even if that public doesn't acknowledge this. Since I was a small child, playing with words, glimpsing to the extent I was able their power, their nuance and music, groping my way toward an exactitude that I knew lay beyond my reach, but that hard-won craft might permit me to visit, sharing that skill as it developed and witnessing the electric connective effect it has on others, all this has been a profound delight. I intend to practice this vocation till the moment I turn up my toes, doubtless still babbling words. Words of journalism, reporting, opinion, polemic, fictional narrative words in the magic of storytelling. Playwriting, yes, and at the core of everything I write, invincible distilled words of poetry. I never managed to accomplish just what I set out to accomplish, of course, whether in a poem or in these commentaries for this program. But it's the exercise, the discipline that exercise demands, and, on a lucky day, the delicious, maddening fun. That's the point, and the reward. Still, for this season finale, I didn't want to use more of my own words, but I still wanted words that addressed sexism and racism and the sacredness of language, especially in this climate where a fake president condemns real facts as fake news, and where, politically, economically, socially, and in so many other ways, language is every day violently violated, precisely so as to invite evil into our souls. Then the voice came to mind that incarnated and addressed all these issues superbly, although we lost its speaker last August 2019 at age 88. I have a slender red hardcover book, only 37 pages long. On the front, the gold writing reads, Toni Morrison, the Nobel Lecture in Literature, 1993. If by some bizarre, remote chance you don't know who Toni Morrison was, or you haven't read her masterpieces of fiction and nonfiction, they're easily researched and found, so I won't list them here. I will say that she was one of the great wordsmiths of any age in the English language, that she was a funny, fierce, generous woman, that the ferocity of her intellect and warmth of her heart maintained a challenging balance, and that she was my friend, and is much missed. For her Nobel lecture she chose, of course, to tell a story. So today's Fighting Words gives itself over gladly to the reading of that story, which is a tale about everything important, a story for our time and for all time. And after the break, that's coming up in our next segment.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Members of the Swedish Academy, ladies and gentlemen. Narrative has never been merely entertainment for me. It is, I believe, one of the principal ways in which we absorb knowledge. I hope you will understand, then, why I begin these remarks with the opening phrase of what must be the oldest sentence in the world, and the earliest one we remember from childhood. Once upon a time. Once upon a time there was an old woman, blind but wise. Or was it an old man? A guru, perhaps, or a griot soothing restless children. I have heard this story, or one exactly like it, in the lore of several cultures. Once upon a time there was an old woman, blind, wise. In the version I know, the woman is the daughter of slaves, black, American, and lives alone in a small house outside of town. Her reputation for wisdom is without peer and without question. Among her people she is both the law and the transgression. The honor she is paid and the awe in which she is held reach beyond her neighborhood to places far away, to the city where the intelligence of rural prophets is the source of much amusement. One day the woman is visited by some young people who seem to be bent on disproving her clairvoyance and showing her up for the fraud they believe she is. Their plan is simple. They enter her house and ask the one question, the answer to which rides solely on her difference from them, a difference they regard as a profound disability, her blindness. They stand before her, and one of them says, "Old woman, I hold in my hand a bird. Tell me whether it is living or dead." She does not answer, and the question is repeated, "Is the bird I am holding living or dead?" Still she does not answer. She is blind and cannot see her visitors, let alone what is in their hands. She does not know their color, gender, or homeland. She only knows their motive. The old woman's silence is so long, the young people have trouble holding their laughter. Finally she speaks, and her voice is soft but stern. "I don't know," she says. "I don't know whether the bird you are holding is dead or alive, but what I do know is that it is in your hands. It is in your hands." Her answer can be taken to mean, if it is dead, you have either found it that way, or you have killed it. If it is alive, you can still kill it. Whether it is to stay alive is your decision. Whatever the case, it is your responsibility. For parading their power and her helplessness, the young visitors are reprimanded, told they are responsible not only for the act of mockery, but also for the small bundle of life sacrificed to achieve its aims. The blind woman shifts attention away from assertions of power to the instrument through which that power is exercised. Speculation on what, other than its own frail body, that bird in the hand might signify has always been attractive to me, but especially so now, thinking as I have been about the work I do that has brought me to this company. So I choose to read the bird as language, and the woman as a practiced writer. She is worried about how the language she dreams in, given to her at birth, is handled, put into service, even withheld from her for certain nefarious purposes. Being a writer, she thinks of language partly as a system, partly as a living thing over which one has control, but mostly as agency, as an act with consequences. So the question the children put to her, "Is it living or dead?" is not unreal, because she thinks of language as susceptible to death, erasure, certainly imperiled and salvageable only by an effort of the will. She believes that if the bird in the hands of her visitors is dead, the custodians are responsible for the corpse. For her, a dead language is not only one no longer spoken or written, it is unyielding language, content to admire its own paralysis. Like statist language, censored and censoring. Ruthless in its policing duties, it has no desire or purpose other than to maintain the free range of its own narcotic narcissism, its own exclusivity and dominance. However moribund, it is not without effect, for it actively thwarts the intellect, stalls conscience, suppresses human potential. Unreceptive to interrogation, it cannot form or tolerate new ideas, shape other thoughts, tell another story, fill baffling silences. Official language, smitheried to sanction ignorance and preserve privilege, is a suit of armor, polished to shocking glitter, a husk from which the night departed long ago. Yet there it is, dumb, predatory, sentimental, exciting reverence in school children, providing shelter for despots, summoning false memories of stability, harmony among the public. She is convinced that when language dies, out of carelessness, disuse, indifference, and absence of esteem, or killed by fiat, not only she herself but all users and makers are accountable for its demise. In her country, children have bitten their tongues off and use bullets instead to iterate the void of speechlessness, of disabled and disabling language, of language adults have abandoned altogether as a device for grappling with meaning, providing guidance, or expressing love. But she knows tongue suicide is not only the choice of children. It is common among the infantile heads of state and power merchants whose evacuated language leaves them with no access to what is left of their human instincts, for they speak only to those who obey, or in order to force obedience. The systematic looting of language can be recognized by the tendency of its users to forego its nuanced, complex, midwifery properties, replacing them with menace and subjugation. Oppressive language does more than represent violence. It is violence. Does more than represent the limits of knowledge. It limits knowledge. Whether it is obscuring state language or the faux language of mindless media, whether it is the proud but calcified language of the academy or the commodity-driven language of science, whether it is the malign language of law without ethics, or language designed for the estrangement of minorities, hiding its racist plunder in its literary cheek, it must be rejected, altered, and exposed. It is the language that drinks blood, laps vulnerabilities, tucks its fascist boots under crinolines of respectability and patriotism, as it moves relentlessly toward the bottom line and the bottomed-out mind. Sexist language, racist language, theistic language, all are typical of the policing languages of mastery, and cannot, do not, permit new knowledge or encourage the mutual exchange of ideas. The old woman is keenly aware that no intellectual mercenary or insatiable dictator, no paid-for politician or demagogue, no counterfeit journalist would be persuaded by her thoughts. There is and will be rousing language to keep citizens armed and arming, slaughtered and slaughtering in the malls, courthouses, post offices, playgrounds, bedrooms, and boulevards, stirring, memorializing language to mask the pity and waste of needless death. There will be more diplomatic language to countenance rape, torture, assassination. There is and will be more seductive, mutant language designed to throttle women, to pack their throats like pate-producing geese with their own unsayable, transgressive words. There will be more of the language of surveillance, disguised as research, of politics and history calculated to render the suffering of millions mute, language glamorized to thrill the dissatisfied and bereft into assaulting their neighbors, arrogant pseudo-empirical language crafted to lock creative people into cages of inferiority and hopelessness. Underneath the eloquence, the glamour, the scholarly associations, however stirring or seductive, the heart of such language is languishing, or perhaps not beating at all, if the bird is already dead. She has thought about what could have been the intellectual history of any discipline if it had not insisted upon, or been forced into, the waste of time and life that rationalizations for and representations of dominance required. Lethal discourses of exclusion, blocking access to cognition for both the excluder and the excluded. The conventional wisdom of the Tower of Babel story is that the collapse was a misfortune, that it was the distraction or the weight of many languages that precipitated the tower's failed architecture, that one monolithic language would have expedited the building and heaven would have been reached. Whose heaven, she wonders, and what kind? Perhaps the achievement of paradise was premature, a little hasty if no one could take the time to understand other languages, other views, other narratives. Had they, the heaven they imagined might have been found at their feet. Complicated, demanding, yes, but a view of heaven as life, not heaven as post-life. She would not want to leave her young visitors with the impression that language should be forced to stay alive merely to be. The vitality of language lies in its ability to limn the actual, imagined, and possible lives of its speakers, readers, writers. Although its poise is sometimes in displacing experience, it is not a substitute for it. It arcs toward the place where meaning may lie. When a president of the United States thought about the graveyard his country had become and said, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it will never forget what they did here," his simple words were exhilarating in their life-sustaining properties because they refused to encapsulate the reality of 600,000 dead men in a cataclysmic race war. Refusing to monumentalize, disdaining the final word, the precise summing up, acknowledging their poor power to add or detract, his words signal deference to the uncapturability of the life it mourns. It is the deference that moves her, that recognition that language can never live up to life once and for all, nor should it. Language can never pin down slavery, genocide, war, nor should it yearn for the arrogance to be able to do so. Its force, its felicity, is in its reach toward the ineffable. Be it grand or slender, burrowing, blasting, or refusing to sanctify, whether it laughs out loud or is a cry without an alphabet, the choice word or the chosen silence, unmolested, language surges toward knowledge, not its destruction. But who does not know of literature banned because it is interrogative, discredited because it is critical, erased because alternate? And how many are outraged by the thought of a self-ravaged tongue? Word work is sublime, she thinks, because it is generative. It makes meaning that secures our difference, our human difference, the way in which we are like no other life. We die. That may be the meaning of life. But we do language. That may be the measure of our lives. Once upon a time, visitors ask an old woman a question. Who are they, these children? What did they make of that encounter? What did they hear in those final words, "The bird is in your hands"? A sentence that gestures toward possibility, or one that drops a latch? Perhaps what the children heard was, "It is not my problem. I am old, female, black, blind. What wisdom I have now is in knowing I cannot help you. The future of language is yours." They stand there. Suppose nothing was in their hands. Suppose the visit was only a ruse, a trick to get to be spoken to, taken seriously as they have not been before. A chance to interrupt, to violate the adult world, its miasma of discourse about them. Urgent questions are at stake, including the one they have asked. Is the bird we hold living or dead? Perhaps the question meant, could someone tell us what is life, what is death? No trick at all, no silliness, a straightforward question worthy of the attention of a wise one, an old one. And if the old and wise who have lived life and faced death cannot describe either, who can? But she does not. She keeps her secret, her good opinion of herself, her gnomic pronouncements, her art without commitment. She keeps her distance, enforces it, and retreats into the singularity of isolation in sophisticated, privileged space. Nothing, no word follows her declaration of transfer. That silence is deep, deeper than the meaning available in the words she has spoken. It shivers, this silence, and the children, annoyed, fill it with language invented on the spot. Is there no speech, they ask her, no words you can give us that help us break through your dossier of failures? Through the education you have just given us that is no education at all, because we are paying close attention to what you have done as well as to what you have said? To the barrier you have erected between generosity and wisdom? We have no bird in our hands, living or dead. We have only you, and our important question, is the nothing in our hands something you could not bear to contemplate, to even guess? Don't you remember being young, when language was magic without meaning, when what you could say could not mean? When the invisible was what imagination strove to see, when questions and demands for answers burned so brightly you trembled with fury at not knowing. Do we have to begin consciousness with a battle heroes and heroines like you have already fought and lost, leaving us with nothing in our hands except what you have imagined is there? Your answer is artful. But its artfulness embarrasses us and ought to embarrass you. Your answer is indecent in its self-congratulation, a made-for-television script that makes no sense if there is nothing in our hands. Why didn't you reach out, touch us with your soft fingers, delay the sound bite, the lesson, until you knew who we were? Did you so despise our trick, our modus operandi, that you could not see that we were baffled about how to get your attention? We are young, unripe. We have heard all our short lives that we have to be responsible. What could that possibly mean in the catastrophe this world has become, where, as a poet said, nothing needs to be exposed, since it is already barefaced? Our inheritance is an affront. You want us to have your old blank eyes and see only cruelty and mediocrity. Do you think we are stupid enough to perjure ourselves again and again with the fiction of nationhood? How dare you talk to us of duty when we stand waist deep in the toxin of your past? You trivialize us and trivialize the bird that is not in our hands. Is there no context for our lives? No song, no literature, no poem full of vitamins, no history connected to experience that you can pass along to help us start strong? You are an adult. The old one, the wise one, stop thinking about saving your face. Think of our lives and tell us your particularized world. Make up a story. Narrative is radical, creating us at the very moment it is being created. We will not blame you if your reach exceeds your grasp. If love so ignites your words that they go down in flames and nothing is left but their scald. Or if, with the reticence of a surgeon's hands, your words suture only the places where blood might flow. We know you can never do it properly, once and for all. Passion is never enough, neither is skill. But try. For our sake and yours, forget your name in the street. Tell us what the world has been to you in the dark places and in the light. Don't tell us what to believe, what to fear. Show us belief's wide skirt and the stitch that unravels fear's call. You, old woman, blessed with blindness, can speak the language that tells us what only language can, how to see without pictures. Language alone protects us from the scariness of things with no names. Language alone is meditation. Tell us what it is to be a woman, so that we may know what it is to be a man, what moves at the margin, what it is to have no home in this place, to be set adrift from the one you knew, what it is to live at the edge of towns that cannot bear your company. Tell us about ships turned away from shorelines at Easter, placenta in a field. Tell us about a wagon load of slaves, how they sang so softly their breath was indistinguishable from the falling snow, how they knew from the hunch of the nearest shoulder that the next stop would be their last, how, with hands prayered in their sex, they thought of heat, then sun, lifting their faces as though it was there for the taking, turning as though there for the taking. They stop at an inn. The driver and his mate go in with the lamp, leaving them humming in the dark. The horse's void steams into the snow beneath its hooves, and the hiss and melt are the envy of the freezing slaves. The inn door opens. A girl and a boy step away from its light. They climb into the wagon bed. The boy will have a gun in 3 years, but now he carries a lamp and a jug of warm cider. They pass it from mouth to mouth. The girl offers bread, pieces of meat, and something more, a glance into the eyes of the one she serves. 1 helping for each man, 2 for each woman, and a look. They look back. The next stop will be their last, but not this one. This one is warmed. It's quiet again when the children finish speaking, until the woman breaks into the silence. Finally, she says, I trust you now. I trust you with the bird that is not in your hands because you have truly caught it. Look, how lovely it is, this thing we have done, together. That was Toni Morrison's Nobel Lecture in Literature in 1993. She added a short statement of gratitude to the Academy and to the artists who went before her, and closed with these words: It is therefore mindful of the gift of my predecessors, the blessing of my sisters, in joyful anticipation of writers to come, that I accept the honor the Swedish Academy has done me, and ask you to share what is for me a moment of grace. Sharing that grace, her grace, genius, and wisdom, constitute today's fighting words. Add yours on Twitter And remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. I hope you have a good and energizing summer, and remember that we'll be on hiatus until after Labor Day. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.